This is the Non-Microwave Truth, and I am CL Whiteside. Today is special. I know people have asked me, hey, let me be on your podcast, and I've always told you sorry. But today I am going to be on with someone. Albee Swenson, podcaster of The Little Things, a Time of Grace production. We are linking up today, and she will be interviewing me, so I guess you can get to know me a little bit better, and you also can get to know her. And you should definitely check out her podcast. Now, this might not be the normal perspective that you are used to hearing, but it is awesome to get a different perspective. And this could help you relate to your parents, your aunts, your uncles, your teachers, different people that you come in contact with each and every day. So, like I said, we want to read as many books as we can, meaning we want to get to know as many people as we can. So this is an awesome perspective that you might not have thought about. And maybe this can help navigate the conversation when you talk to one of your parents or teachers the next time.
Today, I am going to be interviewing CL Whiteside. He hosts a podcast that I hope that you've checked out. It's called the Non-Microwaved Truth, right here on Time of Grace. And my producer sent it to me probably back in maybe April or May when he first started doing this for Time of Grace. And I fell in love with it right away. So I'm super excited to interview him today. All right. So first of all, we're going to start out with a first world problem. So here's my first world problem for you, CL. What kind of distractions do you think the disciples faced? So we have to deal with, Netflix and Amazon Prime and everything we can see on our phones. So what distractions do you think were problems for the disciples?
Some of the distractions I think the disciples had were, especially like who's greater, but I'm guessing they all didn't perform the same type of miracles. So when God gave them the power to perform different miracles, I'm guessing that some of them did different things, and they probably argued like, my miracle is way better than yours. Like, no, mine was definitely better than yours. And just small, simple things from eating what they're going to eat to who does Jesus like the best, to how people were perceiving him and reacting to the different things that they were saying. So that's something I would guess. What do you guess?
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking of how they like to argue along the way. So I think their distractions were probably pretty petty. But then also when they started the church, we know that, the widows were being overlooked. So there were some functions in the church that they had to, they could see as distractions, but they had to sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to think of, they had to give it to someone else. They had to delegate those things to other people so that it wouldn't become a distraction to them, so that they could keep doing the teaching and the preaching. So, I think there was probably distractions that every generation has to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think they probably had some typical men things they argued about too. Probably some Pharisaical things where they got a little bit like the Pharisee. Who's the best Pharisee? Who's the best at this? Who's the best? I don't know what type of sport they had back then. I always think about like the Roman Empire and gladiators, who they would bet on fighting, like it's UFC fighting and stuff. But maybe they had that, maybe they didn't back then.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. You want me to say it or you want to say it? What time is it?
It is dinner time. You have
Awesome.
been watching. That's good.
I did my research. So CL, how did you come to do the Non-Microwave Truth, and what was the idea behind starting this podcast?
The idea behind this podcast was really to try to speak to Generation Z and millennials. And we have so many different things in the world that are constantly challenging us as Christians. It was more so putting those worldly objectives and perspectives to the test and comparing it to God's word and what does he say to each one of us. So it's helping a young Christian man or woman see things from a different perspective, but trying to find the absolute truth, which is God's word in the Bible. Oh yeah, and I think I came up with the microwave concept because so many things in our culture, you got to have it right now. And we want to speed up the process. We really don't want to wait. We want it right then and there. But a lot of times biblical truths are more like baked, or they're more, it just takes more time to truly understand it and get to the point. And a lot of things you don't want to rush. Like you don't want to put a steak in a microwave. and cook that. You got to put that on the grill, or you got to make sure that you're doing that the right way in the oven. And I think that's the same thing with God's word and a lot of truths. You can't just microwave it. You have to unpack it, and you have to truly digest it and allow it to be cooked or simmered the proper way. Did you struggle to find the title of your podcast?
Not too much. I think Nia and I had one phone conversation and we sort of came up with, I just wanted something, I just pick out little everyday things, and the idea of maybe changing your mentality just a tiny bit. All right. So let people get to know you a little bit. Tell me about your job. What you do?
I am an assistant principal at a high school. And what does that encompass? Man, that's so some days it's like counseling, some days it's like encouraging, some days it's supporting other teachers, some days it's laying down the law and being a disciplinarian. And then besides that, I also coach football and basketball. And for a number of years, I was running the weight room. So I usually stay busy doing those type of things. But a lot of it is just dealing with the kids and helping the culture of the school and trying to dictate or keep kids on a straight line.
So for the most part, you're dealing with 14 to 18, 19-year-olds, somewhere in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So talking about that age groups, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see teens facing today?
I think it's the same issues that some of us adults face at times. It's like, what is our identity and what is our identity going to be wrapped in? And I think it's just challenging for them because they have so many different things pulling at them. And especially when they get to high school, some of their bubbles get popped with. Before they came to high school, they might have been known as a basketball player or a singer or a musician. Then all of a sudden they get to high school and it's like they're not necessarily the best, or they get cut, or it doesn't go exactly how they want. So it's them finding who they are and then trying to find a group of friends or a group of people that they can surround themselves with. And also, how do they become more independent? Because they're still children, but at the same time, they're not adults. So that's a complex area and way for them to maneuver around for sure.
I think another thing that I saw too, my son graduated last year, and I was sort of surprised at the pressure these kids put on themselves.
Yes.
Like, I don't know how many people I told last year, you don't have to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Like, I'm not doing anything I thought I was going to be doing when I was your age. So take the next step and don't put so much pressure on yourself. Like, what if I go to the wrong college? Well, then you figure that out and you go to a different one. Or what if I'm on the wrong career path? Well, then you stop doing that and you change directions, because that's what all the rest of us do.
That's unique though. So you don't feel like you put any pressure on them?
I don't put pressure on my kids because my husband went to nursing school at 27. So he had gone to college for a couple of different things. And I took a year off in between high school and college. So neither one of us really knew what we were doing. And so for me, I just figure, to be 18 and feel like you need to know what the rest of your life is going to look like is an expectation that I wouldn't even dream of putting on my kids, because I just think life happens.
Yep. I think that's unique though, because since you had that little break or a different path, you know that there are multiple ways to get there.
Yeah.
Especially for the parents who went from point A to B to C, they really don't understand if their kids take a different path at a time. They got to do it just like I did. They got to do it just like I did, or they have to do it better. And it's like, not necessarily. There are a lot of different ways to get to this point.
Are there any things that you see in terms of things that teens are dealing with that us parents are totally oblivious to? That, like we're rocking around and you would love to say to parents, look, you have no idea.
I think one of the biggest things is they don't understand. They might not even really know their child, especially how they talk or act on social media. Because I've seen some of my students' group chats and I'm just like, oh my goodness, like, do your mom know you talk like this? Do you know your dad? Does your dad know you talk like this? And they're like, no. And parents probably are oblivious to their children being a different person in that space, because when you're behind the screen and you have that peer pressure and you have other people who are kind of influencing and encouraging you to act a certain way, they usually give into that type of pressure. So they usually don't know their child as well as they think they do. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Ooh, that's good. That's really good. I know that my kids, every once in a while, they, I have them for Snapchat and, I'm on their Instagram pages and all of a
You're
sudden,
friends with them?
What?
You are friends with them?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. You sure you're
But
not like on the private story?
well, that's what I was going to
Okay.
say. Every once in a while, I get a little message that says, so-and-so posted a private story. And then I'm like, what are you doing blocking me?
Yeah.
What's going on? Yeah, I think you're right on. I think a lot of parents have no idea, or they're friends on Facebook or Instagram. They're, matched up or whatever, but the kids have more than one account, or like you said, the
Yes.
private chats, that we aren't privy to. And so,
Yep. A Finsta or something crazy. Yep. They
yeah.
definitely do.
Ooh, that's good. So is there something we should be doing about that, or just making sure that we're
Something
talking
I
to them?
encourage parents to do is just every once in a while ask your kid to see their phone. And
Yeah.
if they can't give you their phone and just say, hey, show me, like, log on, let me see what you're putting on there, then that's a red flag because they have to know or they have to feel comfortable showing you. And if they can't show you, that means they have stuff on there they shouldn't have on there.
Good to know. Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with teens for years. One of the things that's broken my heart is they tend to go off to college, and at first we can still, hang out and chat together, and then a year or two down the line, they sort of want to see me less or talk to me less because they're in a different crowd and doing something different. And do you have any sort of advice for parents and grandparents as they send their kids off beyond high school? Have you seen things that really help as far as keeping them in the Word, keeping them coming
Mm-hmm.
back to church? Are there any things that we could be doing?
I think even before they leave, it's really trying to help them see that going to church is not just a religious activity.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something we do just to do. It's more so showing them how the church has impacted your life in a positive way. For a lot of, I would say, Generation Z and millennials, if it's not entertaining or they don't get something out of it, they don't see how it's impacting their life, it's like, why in the world would I go? And if they don't see it actually helping them and being beneficial, it's like, I don't want to go to church. Like, for what? And also just being real with them, like, hey, yeah, this pastor doesn't fit you, so you should find somewhere else. Because I think sometimes parents are like, you should just listen to him. You should just listen to him. And it's like, this might not be the place for you. And that's absolutely okay, but you need to find a different place. You need to go ahead and struggle with different things in the Word and find someone who could actually feed you and you can relate to. I think when they don't see someone who can relate to them right away, they kind of just say, forget it. And parents are like, well, why don't you get it? And it's like, I don't want to. Everything else in my life is entertaining. Why can't this be entertaining or fun or impactful or I find meaning in it actually? I'm doing this for you instead of doing it for myself. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I think is really important too for older people to realize who don't necessarily have a college age kid or they've been out of it for a while. When I used to teach my women's Bible studies, I would say to the women, do you know how important it is that when these college students come back, people actually notice them and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, how are you doing? And they would say, yeah, but we don't know anything about them. And I would say, well, then you should be talking to them. Then you should be saying, where are you going to school? And how is it? And how are your classes? And do you have good professors? And, it's not hard to take 3 minutes and open up and talk to these young adults and make them feel like we care that you're here.
Mm.
And I think that's one thing that the church can do. And more often than not, when I start talking to those young adults, I end up having a half-hour conversation and they're great people. If you just go up and start talking to them, they're more than happy to talk to you. So
Yeah.
I think it goes both ways, as far as what our young adults are looking for in a church, but also making sure that the church is welcoming them.
Yeah. Taking time is so tough because we all get so busy. Like we all have our different things that we're dealing with, different issues. And that is true though, because I think about some of my former athletes, how I try to text them or even once in a while I hit them up and say, hey, you want to do a devotion on the Bible app? Usually they're very receptive to it. It's just more so, do I remember and make the time to actually reach out and do it? So that is tough, but that's like the only way though. You got to make the time to do it.
So what are some ways that you see teens being pulled into secular ideology? And what truths, if any, are Christian teens embracing from the secular world? So you brought up identity before, but is there anything else that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think a big one is just who do you love, and like the concept and term of love. And it's funny because we had a student who had like a shirt that was like a man can kiss a man and a woman can kiss a woman. There are bigger issues in the world. And I was just kind of like, well, what does that mean to you? She's like, well, like in Afghanistan and stuff. I was like, well, what does God say about a man and a man kissing? She's like, well, in my opinion. I'm like, no, I'm not talking about your opinion. Like, what does God say? So I think it's really tough because they want to they want to accept other cultures and other views and other philosophies. But at the same time, you don't want to forfeit what God is telling you. And there's a way to love someone and not agree with someone. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that people struggle with. Like, just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I hate you. It doesn't mean that I dislike you or I want you to go to hell or it's the end of the world. It's just I don't agree with you. And I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with you, because it's not necessarily my opinion I'm basing this off. I'm basing this off of God's word. So that's something that they're constantly being pulled to figure out and be like, well, if you don't agree, then you don't like me. It's like, nah, it's not like that all the time. And I think another one is that there are things that kind of influence them that they don't even know, like music and TV and just things of the media and the entertainment, and they don't even know it. But all of a sudden you rapping a song that's talking about objectifying women and smoking and drinking, and you're like, well, I just like the beat. It's like, no, this starts to become okay to you. We become callous to the different stuff that we are constantly feeding our minds. So that's just something that some of them are very conscious of, because I know some of my students are like, yeah, I'm off social media. And some of them, they just can't help it. And like, it's not having any effect on me. What I listen to doesn't have any effect on me. So that's probably the biggest thing in just battling, all right, what really is influencing me and impacting me? Because we're kind of in denial about that. What have you seen for your kids?
Definitely music is a huge one, because what everybody's listening to, in the secular world is more often than not what I want being played in my house. So there's more often than I'd like to admit, my kids bring their phones and their speakers in when they take showers, and I'll be hearing this music outside and I'll be knocking on the door. I'm like, no, turn that off.
Yep.
My son makes TikTok videos, and
can he dance?
He actually can.
Can you dance?
Can I? Well, not publicly, not in front of people.
Okay.
But my son makes TikTok videos, which are really impressive. And my husband and I both joined TikTok so that we could follow our kids and find out what they're posting. And he was looking through my phone the other day. He was looking through my TikToks and he's like, Mom, you hardly ever like my videos. And I say, if there's a bad word in any of the songs that are on your video, I'm not liking that. So you need to use clean music and I'll like your videos. That's why I'm not, because if people look me up and say, what does she like? Unless you have the right music, I'm not liking it.
That's so funny you brought that up. That's a different phenomenon too. Like the likes and the views, how much that affects who they are and their value at times. For sure. Like they might post something and it gets like 100 likes. And it's like, what's wrong? I got to delete it. I didn't get my normal 500. And it's like, what? And just like, it means a lot though. Like it helps them feel life. It gives them energy. It's where they find value at times.
So true. That, and that's going to bring us to the next thing I actually want to talk about is phones. As a mom, so I got my first iPhone. This is probably embarrassing to admit, but in 2017. So some of my kids had iPhones before I did, but as a mom, I think parents struggle with this whole technology thing. We all try. I make my kids turn in their phones at night until they're 18, which they have told me I am the biggest dictator of anyone that they know. That is just so insanely crazy. Nobody turns in their phone at night, Mom. And I'm like, you're going to, because you're
I know some parents that do that.
Do you?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
There's a couple parents I've encouraged to do that. Like, dude, take away their phone.
Right. And dinner time, there's like a rule that you don't have your phone and that type of thing, but it's definitely a struggle. It's always a struggle, that whole idea of balance. And I've tried to teach my kids, when you're on social media or when you guys are talking, texting back and forth and all that, it's just like a shadow of the real thing. It's so much more fun to just be together with friends and hang out and do stuff than to be on the phone. So do you have any ideas for the balance that parents are trying to get with their teens and technology?
Yeah, I definitely think if they are addicted, and a lot of them are, taking their phones at night. So it's super funny. I just had a student, like, he's falling asleep in class, and I caught him on his phone. He's like, I was texting my mom. I was like, all right, prove it. And then he shows me the text message, and all it says is it's 2:54 a.m. She's like, go to sleep. And it's like, dude, you on your phone that much? So I
Yeah.
think really limiting how much they're on there, if they can't do it themselves. Some students and some teenagers could do a good job of like, all right, I have other things to do. But a lot of them just can't limit it themselves. So that screen time and letting them know, like, all right, you only get this much screen time helps out so much. And it's trying to get them to see, like, do you know how this is influencing or affecting you? And until they see that, I think it's always going to be a battle, though. But I don't know necessarily how to get them to see that. I guess it's maybe pointing out or having them look at some of their other friends or peers, like, do you see how this is influencing them? Do you see if you would have been on your phone, you wouldn't be able to do this or that? So, yeah, that's complex, though. I think that's something that millennials have passed down to them, though, that they have to have their technology all the time. It's got to be on your hip. You really can't turn it off. You might miss something. That's probably the biggest fear. I'm going to miss something. I'm going to miss this text. I'm going to miss the latest thing that's happening. It's like, if it's that important, you will find out about it. Somebody else will tell you.
Yeah. And let's face it too. I mean, as parents, you have to be setting the example. You know, if you're not, because a lot of parents are sitting on their phones as much or more than their kids are. So if you're not willing to do the same, then you can't really talk to your kids about it.
Well,
So CL, do you have any ideas for things that parents and grandparents can do to help their kids sort of, not get swallowed up by secular culture?
I think one of the big things is allowing them to express and share the things that they disagree with and allow them to challenge things. I think sometimes we act like people aren't Christians when they challenge something that's in the Bible or they challenge God. And I don't think that's necessarily anything wrong with it, especially if you actually research it. So sometimes what I see, what we do as people is we hear something new and then we research that and we leave it at that. But it's also like, if you hear this new thing, go ahead and research it, but also research the Bible. Also look at the biblical truth and then compare and see who's going to win. And you'll be surprised, like, the Bible's going to win. Like, at the end of the day, it's going to win. And if it doesn't win, that's because it's attacking something that we might be struggling with to the point that we feel like it's our identity or allowing our feelings to rule. But if you really get to challenge in the Bible and you really get to do your research, you're going to be shocked and amazed to be like, man, this is true. I don't necessarily feel like doing this, but this is the truth.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that is so key on that too is that sometimes teens, young adults will say, but that's not in the Bible. Well, actually, body image is in the Bible. It doesn't say body image. It doesn't talk about anorexia, but God talks about how you're fearfully and wonderfully made and how he loves you with an everlasting love. And man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So those things are addressed in the Bible. So what you're saying too is just like bringing those secular things in. As parents and grandparents, it's going to take a little bit of work to say, but this is what the Bible says, but to find those things.
I guess it's also encouraging them to have some type of mentor or a group of people that they actually can go to with these things. Like, I heard somebody was like, well, in the Bible, it never says that you shouldn't have multiple wives. And I was like, it might not necessarily say you shouldn't have multiple wives, but it did say one man and one woman. It also, if you look at all the people who had multiple wives, like, it was horrible. Like, there was nothing good that came from it. There was no true thing where God was approving that. So just getting them to see, like, all right, find somebody that can mentor you, find someone who can share this to you, find someone who can break it down to you. And then just to your point, like you said, just because it doesn't say exactly not this, look at the other context of it for sure.
All right, let's talk about racial tension. That was like a big, big deal in 2020. What do you see as the major issues regarding race that teens are dealing with today, or are they?
I think for teens right now, they're trying to figure out where do they stand and how do they show support in some ways. I think it's also a fear on what's taking too much and going too far. And then there's also the opposite side of I don't want to give anything up and I want to deny that this is even happening. So I think one of the things they battle with too is just seeing where do their families stand with this or their parents. So they have all these different things that they're trying to deal with. They're trying to deal with their parents' aspect and perspective. They're trying to deal with the social media and the media's influence and effect in telling them what they should and shouldn't believe. Then they have their friends and their peers, and then they also have their own experiences. And when I look at it, it comes down to, of course, it's sin, but specific sin is just selfishness and not having the ability to be empathetic and to relate or put your shoes in someone else's shoes, put yourself in someone else's place or shoes, I should say. I think that's really big for that.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. My kids, my daughter, her best friend is from Egypt. And so totally different race, and they're just the best of friends. And they just, it's kind of funny until you make a deal about it. It's not a deal. You know what I mean? Like they never make a deal about it unless somebody makes a deal about it in front of them, and then it becomes a deal and you have to mess with both of them. But, I've been kind of surprised at how my kids are pretty, one of the things that I taught my kids from the very young age is the whole bullying thing. Like anytime you see somebody else being bullied, it's your job to step in. So unless they have a gun or, a knife or something, and it's dangerous, if you see it happening, then it's your job to call the other person out. And so I don't know. I see my kids being pretty willing to, if anybody's trying to put someone else down, no matter if it's a race issue or a gender issue, or, this person's smarter than this person, or this one's dressed weird or whatever. It's a non-issue.
No, you just made me think of something too, that it's hard for some teenagers to forgive because they might have had something done to them that was racially charged on either end of the spectrum, and their ability to forgive and not put that on everyone who seems to be like them. So don't put it on every Black person. Don't put it on every white person. This was an isolated incident where this is not encompassing the whole group, but this is just that incident. Can you make it just this, or is it going to be every single thing that comes in your life? And it's just a mentality and a mindset, because like you said, it's how much should you bring it up though? That's very tough, because you can't deny race and racial issues and tension, but at the same time, you also can't contribute it to every single thing that happens in your life that doesn't go your way. So that's probably the toughest part. And then when you have someone who doesn't agree with you, does that mean they're racist or they're sexist, or what does that really mean? But just figuring out that why and just getting to know each person is the toughest part. Because do we have time to do that? I don't know. Do I even want to do that? You could be just like the last person who hurt me.
Yeah.
So,
and that's actually really good, because I think sometimes teens have a tendency to overreact that way. This teacher just hates girls, so I know I'm not going to get a good grade in his class. And it's like, well, hold on. Just because the last person said that doesn't mean,
Yeah. That's so true, because we have some students who they'll quickly go like, that was racially charged. And it's like, well, can you explain to me why? Well, this person got away with this. It's like, they didn't get away with this. Well, this person got this consequence. They got this consequence because they did this and this. Like, oh, I didn't know that. They didn't tell me that. It's like, duh, they're not going to tell you exactly why they got in trouble and why they're in that situation. They're going to try to bring that up. I think that's something people do all the time when they get in trouble, especially parents bring that up. Yeah. Sometimes it's because, you're doing this because I'm Black. No, you're doing this because I'm white. You're doing this because you don't have any kids. You're doing this because you're younger. You're doing this. So they bring up anything to try to get out of something. It's like if you get pulled over by a police officer, you might say you pulled me over because I'm a woman. You pulled me over because I'm Black at times. So all of that stuff can definitely have some truth in it, but is it always true is the tough part.
You brought up forgiveness, actually. And so I wanted to bring up cancel culture. It's a pretty hot topic in our culture, clearly. And yet Jesus tells us to forgive 70 times, 7 times. Do you see teens embracing the cancel culture, or do you think they tend to be more forgiving?
Um, it depends on how hurt they are. And it kind of depends on their personality and their perspective on it. For some, they can let stuff just roll off their back pretty easily. But for some, it's like this is continuously happened to me. I am hurting and I'm sick of forgiving over and over and over again. More so, this needs to change. So that's probably the thing that makes them most frustrated at times. It's just like, why should I have to forgive when really this group of people or this person should change? It shouldn't be me having to forgive. And sometimes it's just reminding them like you can still forgive, but not necessarily forget or all of a sudden have to be buddy buddy with that person. Forgiving a lot of times is doing something for yourself and not always just for them. Because you can't swallow poison and expect it to affect somebody else. And you not forgiving sometimes is affecting you more negatively than it is affecting that other person.
Yeah, but I think you hit on something that's really important for our teens to learn, and that's boundaries. Like you said, just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean you let them do it again and again and again. So it was Maya Angelou that said, if a person shows you who they are, believe them. And so when my kids come home and say, so-and-so did this, and it really stunk and they really hurt my feelings, I'm like, definitely forgive them, give them another chance, but just keep in the back of your mind, and then when that happens again, we're sort of like, okay, now you got to have boundaries. You can't tell them everything because their tendency is to throw it back in your face at the worst possible moment. So, learning those things, not letting yourself get walked on all the time, forgiving, being loving, but putting those boundaries up is an important part of being a teen.
Yeah, it truly is. And I think that you just have to, like kind of given the police example, is you have to assess and understand where people are coming from. So when I look at a police thing, especially for blacks, you have to understand that if their encounters have been with police officers and they have been negative, they're going to have in their mind, we're going to have in our mind necessarily that this police officer is pulling me over for X, Y, and Z. So that doesn't give me or anyone the right to be like, well, that's not what happened, because we don't really know. It's more so assessing the situation and then just also being real about what happened. Why did this happen? And I think when we're not in that position, sometimes we discredit it. Yeah. And then sometimes when we are in that position, you also don't want to be victim blaming too. Mm-hmm. So that's the toughest and the finest line on how do you make progress with that though. Because sometimes it's absolutely real. And sometimes it's like, is this because of something else that happened to me or experience that I had before? And both are real, but doesn't always make it a fact.
So what are some things that you see in the generations, right now, the young people that you're just excited about?
I think their knowledge on a lot of things is so much farther and more advanced than millennials and older, I should say. And it's more so I always just say to them, so you have this knowledge, you have this awareness, what are you going to do with it though? Mm-hmm. Like it's one thing to know, to have the foundation. It's another thing to actually act and to walk with your talking. So that gives me a lot of hope. And it's the ability and the courage to want to make an impact. Yes. Like a lot of them want to make an impact. They want to defend what's right. It's more so just understanding what is truly right. They want to defend the truth, but what is absolute truth? I think there's a lot of courage, there's a lot of impact, there's a lot of desire to do meaningful and purposeful work. And they got the energy right now. They definitely have the energy. So I think you lose that energy when you get a little older and things don't go your way a couple of times and you just have to deal with mess in this world. But right now they definitely have the energy and they want to make the impact and they want to do purposeful and meaningful work for sure.
I think that's true. And I also see them. I think that I think I had more tunnel vision when I was young than they do. They seem to be more aware of people around them. I think from what I see anyway. Mm-hmm. Just yesterday, I was going to just mow my front yard quick. And I brought the lawnmower over and my son and his friend were over working on their trucks. And I just, pulled the cord a couple times and it didn't go. And my son's friend just stepped right over. He's like, let me get that for you. And I go, I'm fairly embarrassed, but thank you for noticing. He didn't just let me sit there and figure it out. He he was aware he's working on his own truck, but he's watching me bring the lawnmower up over, and he didn't sit and watch me struggle. He just immediately was like, she needs help. So
Yeah.
I love that they're more aware, I think, than I was at that age. I'm not so sure I notice people more. So
Yeah.
I think
Especially when
that,
they don't have their phone in their hand.
yeah, no, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
I had
And
a question though for you.
yeah.
Is there anything that you think that you really did a good job of talking to your children about? And also, is there anything that you feel like, man, I wish I probably would have talked to them about this a little more?
Mm. Well, I definitely learned. So my youngest is 13 right now, and I think I was way too structured with my first. So, I had a certain expectation and a certain way that I thought things should go. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a child who has dyslexia. And so when that child came along, everything got blown out the window as far as expectations. So because school didn't go the way it should go. And so that really taught me that I had started out with these expectations of how I thought school should be, and what it should look like for all my kids. And pretty early on, I figured out that wasn't going to be the way it was going to be. And I wish that I would have learned that earlier, just because I would have been far less stressed out when things don't turn out. Every child is so, so different that thankfully God knocked me alongside the head pretty early. One of the things that I think that I've gotten a lot better at, that I really stunk at to begin with teens particularly, is I used to think that I had to correct everything that they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I really, really appreciated the podcast you did on prayer. Be careful what you ask. Because I think as parents, it's really easy for us to pray that God gives them the easy way. But that's not the character building way a lot of times. And so I think we have to be a little bit careful that we don't let them struggle through. And what I've learned through my two oldest ones saying to me different times, Mom, don't correct me. Just let me figure it out. Just back off. And I think the more I've learned to do that and sit on the sidelines and pray. And the other thing that I've learned that I probably should have learned earlier, but I can't tell people enough to do, is find the positives and find reasons to encourage your children. Because absolutely the biggest motivator for almost all of us is not the times that people are telling us what we're doing wrong, but the times that people are coming behind you and going,
Yep,
you are
real.
amazing. I think one of the big lessons for me is that find ways to encourage your kids, find ways to find them doing the right thing. And that will do so much more than nitpicking.
Mm-hmm. And I have another question.
Yep.
Especially since you're a parent. Because I always wonder this type of stuff with parents, because I don't have any kids, but do you feel like you were the first person to talk to your kids about sex?
No.
Or drugs or racism or any of those things of that nature?
No, in fact, we, the first child is an experiment. And so I think I could have done better with that too. I found out later that they had learned a whole lot on the bus that I didn't realize.
Little Timmy watching something he shouldn't have been watching.
Well, and
his
because
older brother or sister.
They were going to a Christian school, so I sort of assumed that the bus full of Christians wasn't going to be what it was, but that wasn't true at all. So, no, I don't think I was the first one to talk. My 13-year-old.
What age was this?
Probably 7th or 8th grade.
That's the tough part too. What age do you need to do this in?
So I think we started now as our kids got younger. We've done a better job. But one of the ways I like to do it, quite honestly, what I've learned, I never used to watch TV at all. I had too many things to do. And as my kids got to be teens, one of the best experiences for teaching, I think, is sitting down and watching shows with them. So, one of the things we watched off the bat was Psych. My daughter got into my oldest is a daughter, and So when they're hopping in bed together, I'm like, whoa, hold on, pause. You guys, like, this is not the way to do it. And then of course, when the relationship doesn't work, that's the time to say, see why this just causes so many issues. And so I make a point almost 4 or 5 nights a week. If one of my teens is home, my older teens all work, but if they want to watch something, I sit down and watch the show with them. And, even as far as language, that's a factor. We don't watch rated R things. So we've already got that barrier up. But so even in terms of drugs, like you said, one of the great things for that is my husband's a nurse. And he used to get the overdoses on his floor from ER. And so he has been crucial. I mean, he's been right on there with my kids saying, people who use heroin are always chasing their first high. So you don't get a one chance to just try it. You're addicted the first time. So you can't do it. So my husband's been really good about, even people on meth, he's like, it'll mess you up. Like you can't do it. You just can't. So but I think watching shows, I think that's a really good way to start discussions. We have prayers and devotions every night together as a family, every night. And we read the Bible together. So between reading the Bible and watching a TV show, just a lot of things come up.
Yeah. I think you hit on the head a couple of things I think parents forget too. They forget that they need to have a number of conversations. Like it's not just one conversation about the birds and bees and then you stop. And then I think some parents really forget too that even though they get to 16, 17, 18, even 19, they're not adults. Because I know some parents are like, well, they're going to do what they're going to do. So I'm going to get them the condoms actually. And it's like, what? Like they still will listen to you actually. They still want to hear what you have to say. It might be a little battle right then and there, but they're listening more than you think. So that those ongoing conversations, and sounds like you're very intentional, is awesome.
Well, I think one of the hardest conversations that I didn't realize that I needed to have, I told Pastor Mike this when we did the abortion series, but one of my children has had a relationship for 2 years already. And we have all kinds of rules about being alone and all this stuff. But the bottom line is when they drive away in their car, they leave for the day. And I don't know where they are and what they're doing. So, they know what our expectations are, but the bottom line is I don't know. And so for the first time ever, I had the conversation that, I know what's right and I get it, but I just want to make sure you understand that if something happens and if there is a baby, I want to see my grandkids. I don't want you to think that abortion is the only way out for you. So I want to make sure that you understand that if things don't go as planned, I want to be part of the conversation. And I don't know who was more red, me or the child, as I was saying this. And honestly, the child looked at me. I mean, I'm saying child, I'm trying to keep sex out of it and everything. But my child was like, oh my gosh, Mom, I can't believe you just said that. I'm like, I just want you to know that I want to be part of the conversation. And I don't want you to feel like if you don't live a certain way, you can't come talk to me. And so.
Yeah, because it only takes one time.
That's exactly right. And I think the other thing that I'm trying to learn, which is really hard for me sometimes, is to just be super transparent with my kids about what I did right and what I did wrong. And to just be like, you think that you can't talk to me because I did everything right. I didn't do everything right. And so you can talk to me.
That's something too I think about, is that when I do have those conversations with my athletes and different students and different kids, I want to be very transparent, but then I'm very conscious, like, man, I got to make sure I'm not making it seem like it was cool or like this is what everybody did. I almost have to share the consequences with them too, or just like, this is why this was so stupid, but you can do better than me. You can do better than me, but I did mess up too. The transparency is the key. I think they desire that a lot.
So I think that's just a big part of teens and young adults, is just making sure that they know that we care for them and that we're willing to have the conversations, even if they're awkward, difficult, hard conversations. We're willing to be there for them.
Yep, the more you do it, the better. It's only awkward if you're allowed to be awkward.
And it is sometimes awkward.
It has been a blessing, and I want to thank Albee Swenson, podcaster of The Little Things, for the interview today. I know some of you are a little jealous or mad at me because I said that I wouldn't be on here with anyone, but we always can make an exception, right? So thank you for allowing this to happen, and hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you've taken something away from this. And this is the Non-Microwave Truth, a Time of Grace production. Peace, punch, Captain Crunch, say no to drugs and yes to Jesus. I'm out.